Hello YouTube, my name is Daniel and welcome back to another video. In this video I'm going to be refactoring my simple notes app to use Jetpack Compose for the UI. In order to follow this video, you will need to watch the previous video where I refactor my notes app to use Room Database. So firstly, in order to start using Compose, you will need to add some dependencies. So it'll be these dependencies here. As always, a link to the code is in the description, so you can just copy and paste these and then run a sync. Next, you will need to add build features here and just set compose to true. Then you can go ahead and delete the old main activity and create a new empty compose activity. You can also delete the notes adapter and also the notes dialog. Any layout files from the previous app can also be deleted, as these won't be needed in the new app. In order to create an empty compose activity, once you've run the sync, you should be able to right click the top package, select new, and then come down to compose and then select empty compose activity. And this will also set up the color, shape, theme, and type files. In the color file, you just need to add two colors here called notes background and notes view background. And then once you've done that, you should be ready to start working on the project. And then once you've done that, you should be able to start on the refactor. So in main activity, we can add our functions for adding and saving a note and also for deleting a note. So firstly, we want to add private fun delete note. This is going to take a note ID for a parameter, which will be an int. And then we want to launch a coroutine here, so lifecyclescope.launch. And then we can access the DB handler and select delete note, and then pass in the note ID. The DB handler should be a later var just under the main activity and before the onCreate, and then it can be initialized in the onCreate using notes database.provideDB, passing the context, and then accessing note.dao. The next function will be add or save note. This will take three parameters: a note title, which is a string, a note body, which is also a string, and a note ID, which is an int. And don't forget to add fun at the front here. Then we need to launch another coroutine and pass in the dispatcher, which will be dispatchers.io. Then we need a quick if function here just to check if the note ID is equal to 0. So if the note ID is equal to 0, we know we're going to be adding a new note, and if it's not, we're going to be updating a note. If we're adding a note, we need to call dbHandler.insert note and then create a note item, pass in the note title, the note body, and the ID will get created automatically by our Room database. Then for updating a note, we can call dbHandler.updateNote and create a note item. This time we're going to use the ID which was passed as a parameter, and then the note body, and finally the title. Now we've created those two functions, I'm just going to add a bit more space down here and we can start writing our first composable. Our first composable is going to be the App Scaffold. And this will lay out the screen for our app, so it will handle the top app bar, the fab button, and also give us a space to put our content. So fun app scaffold, and all composables should start with a capital letter, and then we just add in the brackets here. This is going to take 3 parameters. The first one will be the DB handler. And for the next parameters, I'm actually going to call the function up here and then pass in our add or save note function and the delete note function. And then Android Studio will work out the necessary types for those parameters. So we will call App Scaffold here, pass in the DB handler. Then I'm going to pass this add or save note and this delete note. Then we can hover over and select add parameters, and that is now add the parameters to our func, and then we're just going to update this name to add or save note, and then the next one to delete note. Now we've added those functions, we can set up our state variables for this. Now we've added those parameters, we can set up our state variables for this function. So these are things like whether we should show a note dialog or delete dialog, or whether the bin drawable has changed like in the previous app. So the first variable is going to be our list of notes. So note equals db handler dot get all notes. Next we have should show note dialog, and this is going to equal remember open brackets mutable state of false. So what this will do here is if this value is set to true, then this will trigger a recomposition, and then the composable, so the app scaffold, will refresh and show the new state. So we will have a composable called notes dialog, and that is going to be remembering this state here, and if that state ever gets set to true, then it will show itself and make itself visible. And then we have another one for should show delete dialog, and that is going to be a mutable state of false again. Then the next two are going to be our current note title. So whenever a note is clicked, we want to update this value to have the value of that note. And then we have the current note body. And these are going to be mutable state of strings. And then one more, which will be the note ID, and this will be initialized as 0. And now we can begin creating our scaffold. So inside the parentheses, we want to add a top bar, open brackets, top app bar, and inside the brackets here, we want to add a title, which will be a text. Pass in string resource and the ID of r.string.appName. And then we can also pass the background color, which will be purple 700. And then we can remove these two curly braces here. Next we can specify our content. The content will be a column, and we just need to run that import. And then we pass in a modifier, and first the dot background, which will be notes view background. then fill max height, and fill max width. And those curly braces can be removed after the scaffold. Now I'm not sure why this is giving us red here. Might be because we need to use... Okay, I think it's imported the wrong modifier here. So modifier equals... We want to use the compose modifier. Yeah. So if this happens, we just need to remove this import here. So java.lang.reflect. There we go. And at the bottom, we should be able to specify our background, which would be notes view background. Then we're just going to leave the content of this column empty because we're going to be creating those composables later on. Still inside the scaffold, we can now add our floating action button position, which will be fabPosition.end, and then our floating action button, which will be floating action button. In the onClick, we're going to assign some variables, and these will be the state variables that we created at the top of this composable. So firstly, should show note dialog dot value is going to be set to the opposite of whatever that value is. So if it's set to true, it will be set to false and the dialog will be hidden, or if it's set to false, it will be set to true and the dialog will show. Next, we're going to set the current note body value to an empty string, and the current note title to an empty string as well. The background color for this will also be purple 700, and then inside the floating action button, we just want a single text widget, and we just kind of pass in plus for the string. And that is it for the scaffold apart from the column content. The next composable we're going to create is our bin image. Composable fun bin image. And this is going to take one parameter, which we called has been drawable changed. And this will be a mutable state of Boolean. Let's open brackets and we just need to run that import. There we go. And then we're going to declare a val here, which is going to be has changed. And that is going to equal remember has been drawable changed. And then the composable for this will be a box. And we need to add a modifier. And this will be .fill max size. Then inside the box we have an image, the painter, just need to run that import. The painter will be painter resource, and the ID will be, and then for the ID we're going to use an if function. So if has changed is false, then we're going to use the normal bin drawable, which is png.bin, and else is going to be the other bin drawable. Next we can add the content description, which will be notes bin, and then the modifier. And then we're going to specify the height, which is going to be 90 dp, and then the width, which will be the same. A bottom padding of 12 dp, and then an alignment dot bottom start, because we want this to align the bottom left hand corner, and that is the bin image composable completed. And now we can move on to the notes list, so that will be at composable fun notes list. This will take a few parameters. The first one being a notes list, which would be live data, list of notes item. Next will be the current note title, which is a mutable state of string. We then have the current note body, which is a string as well. Then the ID, which is an int. Show dialog, which is a boolean, and also show delete dialog. Now we can define our notes, which will be notes list dot observe as state. So whenever anything gets updated in our notes list, we're going to be observing that and then updating the list of notes. Our notes list will be a lazy row, and we pass in the modifier, which will be padding. We're going to add 60p to the padding. Horizontal arrangement, which will be arrangement dot spaced by 12 dp, so each item will have a 12 dp space between them. Then inside our lazy row, we're going to add items indexed. The items will be either notes dot value or an empty list. And now we can specify the item content and add the indexed and item. The item content will be a column. And now we just add the modifier. I'm just going to put this on one line to make it more visible. So the background for this will be notes background. Then the height, which will be 120 dp. The width, which will be the same. A padding all the way around, which will be 12 dp. And now we can add a pointer input, which which will be unit, and open brackets. And here we can define our tap gestures, so on tap and also on long press. I wasn't able to find a way how we can do drag and drop on a lazy row in Compose, so unfortunately we're going to have to use long press to delete the note. If you do find a way to do drag and drop on a lazy row in Jetpack Compose, please let me know, because it would be really useful to me. So to specify our tap gestures, we need to use detect tap gestures and specify on tap, and instead of curly braces here, this just needs to be parentheses. So let's move this into here, get rid of that. So in the on tap, we want to set the current note title dot value to notes dot value dot get index, pass in the index, and then dot title. Now if that is null, we're just going to set it to an empty string, and we're going to do the same for the body. And the same for the ID, and we're just going to set that to 0 if it is null. Next we want to set the show dialog dot value to true. Then on the long press, we want to set the current note ID dot value to the note ID in the list, so notes dot value dot get, pass in the index dot ID, otherwise 0, and also we just need to add the question mark here, and we want to set show delete dialog dot value to true. And then inside this column we want to add 2 text widgets for the note title and also the note body. So the first one will be item dot title dot toString. The font weight for this will be font weight dot bold. And then the note body, which is item.note .toString, then pass in a modifier, which would be modifier.padding, and we just want to add bottom 12 dp. And that's it for our notes list composable. We can now move on to the delete dialog. So at composable, fun delete dialog, and we pass in the parameters. The first one is show dialog, which is a mutable state of boolean. The note ID, which is an int. Delete note, which is a function, so that will be open parentheses int and then arrow and then unit. And then finally we just have one more, which is has been drawable changed, and that is a mutable state. Now we can start making our dialog. That is going to be material theme and then a column, Inside the column we want to remember one of the parameters, which is going to be open dialog. Now we show dialog here. Now if open dialog is true, we want to show an alert dialog. On dismiss request is going to set the value to false. On new line, the title will be text delete note. Then we can specify text here, and that is going to be, are you sure you want to delete this note? Next we can add the confirm button, which will be a button composable. The onClick will be open dialog dot value equals false, and then we can invoke delete note. So delete note dot invoke and pass in the note ID dot value. Then we need to check whether the bin drawable has been changed. And if it is false, we want to set to true. And then inside the button, we just want to have a text widget just saying yes. And then we can remove the parentheses down here. Then we can remove those curly braces on the alert dialog. And then after the delete dialog, we can add our notes dialog. So that would be at composable fun notes dialog. And then we pass in the show dialog, the note title, the note body, and the note ID, which will be an int, and then the onClick function, which will add or save the note. So this is going to take a string, another string, and an int, and it's not going to return anything, so we pass unit, then we open the brackets here. Then we need to save the should show variable, so we can trigger a recomposition if it gets updated. So remember show dialog. Now if that is true, we can show this notes dialog, and that is going to be a dialog composal. On dismiss request will be empty. Then inside here we want a surface composable, and we're going to add a modifier. So firstly we're going to set the width and the height to 350 dp. Then we're going to specify a shape, which is rounded corner shape. The size is 16 dp, and then a color which is going to be light grey. Then inside the surface, we're going to add a box composable. And the content alignment will be alignment.center. And inside here, we can set our states for the title and the note. So title state will be remember mutable state of text field value, and inside here we can pass the note title dot value, and if it's null it will just be an empty string. And these could be nullable, so we just need to add question marks to the end of these, and also the ID, and just initialize them as null. Then we just need to add a question mark here. Then we have the note state, which will be note body dot value. Now we want to set the context as well, and that will be local context dot current. Then inside this box we want to add a column and also a modifier, which we use align.topStart, and a padding of 12 dp. Then inside here we want a text widget, which would be note title, then a text field. The value of this will be title state.value. Unchanged will be title state.value equals it. I'm going to put these on separate lines to give us more space. Then we can add max lines here and set that to 1. And then single line set to true. Then we can copy and paste these two composables here, because we're going to do similar composables for our note body. So next text widget will be note body, and then we're just going to add a modifier. And set the padding to 12 dp on the top. Then for the text field, it's going to be note state dot value. On value changed, it also needs to be updated. So no single line, but max lines will be set to 20. And then the modifier will be dot height, and that's going to be 180 dp, and then we're also going to add some padding to the bottom, which is 12 dp. And after our column we're going to add a button. Now the onClick is going to be quite large for this, so I'm just going to put it on a separate line. So firstly we want to check if title state dot value dot text is empty, or the note state is empty. Then we're going to show a toast, so toast dot make text. Pass in the context, and then the message, which will be please add a note title and a note body. The length of the toast, which will be short, and then just call .show at the end. And if this is true, we want to return out of the button. Otherwise, we're going to invoke the onClick function to add or save our note, and then pass in the title state .value .text, the note state .value .text, and the note ID .value, or if it's null, we're going to pass 0. And then once that's done, we want to clear out the values of our state objects. So note title .value equals an empty string. Same for the body. And the ID will be set to 0. And finally, we can set should show dialog value to false, so this will close the dialog. And then we're just going to add a modifier to this button. And that will be modifier.align. And then pass in alignment bottom center, and then inside the button we're just going to have a single text widget, which will be text, and that's just going to say save. Now with the notes dialog composable completed, that is all of our composables, and then we can go and add them to our scaffold. So we have our notes list, our bin image, and now we can pass the notes dialog. Show dialog is going to be should show note dialog, and the onClick is going to be add or save note. And then underneath notes dialog, we just need to add our delete dialog. Show dialog will be should show delete dialog. Note ID is current note ID. Delete note is delete note function, and it has been durable changed. It's defined up the top as well. So that is it for the refactor. Let's run the app and see what we got. So we can see here the app is now running. We have our app bar at the top saying Simple Notes YouTube, which is the title of our app. We have the Fab button down here with the plus icon, and then we have our bin drawable. So if we click on the Fab icon, the dialog comes up and we can specify a title and a body. If we click save, a toast will show asking us to please add a note or a body. So I'm just going to add that now. So we're going to use note test and then note body. Then we're going to click save, and we can see it's been added to our list. If we click this, we can see the dialog has come back up, and we're now able to edit the note. So I'm just going to add a digit onto the note title and the note body. If we click save, and we can see that gets updated in the list. Now to delete the note, we just need to perform a long click on the note, and then this dialog will pop up and it's saying, are you sure you want to delete this note? And we just select yes, and we can see the note has been deleted and removed from the list, and also that our bin drawable has been changed here to a full bin. So that is it for this video and this project. If you have any questions, please post them down in the comments. Please like the video and please